And good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the webcast series Loyalty Leader Insights, brought to you by the Loyalty Summit. This week, we're going to be talking about engagement, redemptions, and how we manage, to a degree, the financial aspect of our programs, as we go forward, and in the future. Is the way we manage the financial aspect of our programs any different, or is it the same to how we've done it in the past? How do we change our approach to redemptions and engagement with our members, in the future versus the past? That's the topics we're going to be exploring today. And I'm joined by some fabulous guests. Len Llaguno. Len, in Chicago right now. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Len is from KYROS Insights. He's one of the leading practitioners in the world when it comes to program financial management. So, Len, fantastic to have you on board. Jonathan, who's the CEO at Engage, based in Toronto. Jonathan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having us. Happy to be part of this.
Terrific. No, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you on board. And James Curry, who's the head of product design for loyalty at Emirates, based in Dubai. What time is it there right now, James?
It's just coming up to 25 to 8 in the evening, so not too late.
Still a respectable time. Still a respectable time. Fantastic. Look, let's dive straight into it, everybody. So, the latest news that happened yesterday, everyone's probably across it. Virgin Australia gone into voluntary administration. Not really a surprise, a bit of a basket case of ownership. For those who aren't familiar with the ownership structure of Virgin Australia, I mean, it's basically the worst possible, set of equity holders you can imagine. Australian government said no to a bailout, and they've gone into voluntary administration. Now, I mean, who knows what the crystal ball is going to say, but realistically, nobody expects that they're not going to be around in the future, but it is possible, and there is precedent. For Australians, it's, less than 20 years since Ansett Australia went through this same process. And it begs the question, where does that leave frequent flyers? And it's an interesting situation because, of course, Virgin Australia spun off their Velocity frequent flyer program, a 35% share a number of years ago. They literally only just bought back that share, in the last number of months. So the frequent flyer program is a completely separate entity to the airline. And to be clear, and Virgin Australia and Velocity have been emailing members to make that clear, the frequent flyer program is not under administration. Velocity Frequent Flyer as a separate company is not under administration, but the airline is. And even before this happened this week, the airline is effectively grounded. The only flights they're operating are a skeleton roster of flights within Australia, thanks to the Australian government bankrolling what they call a minimum domestic network. So there isn't really any flights you can redeem on now anyway, and that is the same situation pretty much anywhere in the world. What's interesting with Virgin Australia is they sent an email out yesterday to advise all their members that they are suspending redemptions, all redemptions, for the next 4 weeks. Apparently, and this is where everybody's BS meter, I think, is off the charts, apparently Australians were redeeming too many gift cards, too many electronics, and too much wine. Now, the kids these days play that game, Two Truths and a Lie. I think there's at least 2 truths in there. There's probably gift cards because people are out of work. And you know what? That grocery store gift card is very valuable to them right now. Wine, if anyone knows any Australians, they're not afraid of having a drink. And what else are you meant to do if you're stuck at home in quarantine? And the lockdown in Australia is quite significant, much more severe than it is here in the United States, where I am right now. But here's where they got to be a little bit cheeky. They're trying to suggest that the reason redemptions need to be shut down is because too many people are making redemptions and there's not enough redemptions to be able to fulfill for everybody. The suppliers are having a problem fulfilling redemptions. Again, anyone knows anything about Australia, there's not going to be any problem with wine supply. And there's certainly no problem when it comes to redemption of electronic gift cards. Len, first question to you. Is there actually any plausibility to, when a company trots out a line like that, like we have to restrict redemptions because too many people are restricting purchasing or redeeming for gift cards? Is there any truth to that matter, or is it just a case of the BS meter being off the chart and members are going to completely just lose trust in that program as a result?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I don't know the specifics about the situation there, so it's difficult for me to comment directly on that whole thing. But I do have a level of empathy for the people running that program. They're in a very difficult position, right? Because the reality is there's very little cash coming in. There's a serious cash crunch that's truly happening, right, for airlines clear across the world, and I suspect very much so for them as well. Even though it's a separate spun out company, they're still experiencing significant cash crunch, right? So whether it's truly there's a shortage of supply or a cash problem where they're running low on cash and need to do something to preserve cash, you know, it's a really tough position. And no matter what, it's going to be a difficult decision. If you restrict redemptions, you're going to make your members angry. Absolutely. If you don't, and there continues to be massive redemptions and your cash reserves dwindle, every redemption that happens is $1 closer to bankrupt, right? So the unfortunate reality here is it's just a tough situation all around. Whether or not, you know, what's actually happening under the hood there, related to supply or more related to cash flow, it's hard to tell. I don't have that transparency, but yeah, certainly have a lot of empathy for a tough decision that has to be made there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, really, when you say that the challenges they have financial, it's a cash flow problem. You know, it's not a P&L problem. And we'll come back to that discussion because I know the economics of actually, you know, how frequent flyer programs and loyalty programs make money is confusing to the best of us. And even those of us that consider to be experts in the field. But, you know, most people, even in loyalty programs, struggle to actually understand exactly how the mechanics of the finance work. So we might try to dumb it down a little bit later. And Len, if you don't mind, I might come back to it in a little while. Sure. We can do another bit of a 101 just to kind of remind everybody, but also for those that the financial management of the program isn't their core job, it can be a little bit of a struggle, and maybe we can simplify it for them a little bit. But really what we're talking about here isn't the profitability of the program. It's just the cash. It's literally just a case of the program might still be immensely profitable, and we know that programs that are reported as separate entities, whether they're spun off or they're just accounting-wise reported as separate entities, are often the most profitable divisions of airlines. In fact, you know, a number of the world's major airlines, whether you talk about American Airlines, Qantas, United, a number of them have gone through phases, even before this crisis, where the loyalty program was the only profitable division from a profit and loss standpoint. But really what we're talking about now is literally just short-term problem of cash in the bank. And if there's no money coming in, you can't issue any invoices, you're not getting cash from any clients, but you still got to pay the bills. Everybody listening to us and watching us today has that problem in their household right now. Many people are not getting the checks in, but you still got to pay the bills out. So it's a cash flow problem. We can acknowledge that problem that they have. It's a very real one, you know, and we can critique them all we like, but that doesn't solve their cash flow problem. They need to get cash somehow. The question is, to James, if you restrict the ability of members to make redemptions, to Len's point, you're going to make them angry. Does that have a lasting effect on your relationship with your members, or is it just they're annoyed today and it's okay tomorrow?
Certainly it has a lasting effect from my point of view. I think at the end of the day, you know, you have to be able to deliver on the promise. People engage with you as a loyalty program because there's an expectation that they will get something out of it in the end. It's called loyalty for a reason. And yeah, I 100% agree with Len. I mean, this is a fortunate circumstance for the airline in question. But there are other ways to approach it. Now, the reality is that it's hard for, literally impossible for members now to book flight rewards in this particular case. But what you can do is you can adjust the economics around the types of rewards in your program to support the rewards or the types of behavior that will restrict the impact on cash flow. So what you could do in a scenario like Virgin had gone through would be to actually dial down the rate of exchange on the non-air rewards. So essentially it's a less rich customer proposition, but it's still a customer proposition. So you're not turning it off, but you're nudging or channeling demand to other types of rewards that drive greater benefit. And for any other airlines or programs that are going through similar types of challenges, that may be an angle to look at. if you can, for instance, reduce the richness of the non-air proposition or the non-core proposition, and then increase the richness or incentivize flight reward bookings for down the track when people are ready to return to flying, you can actually nudge or channel that behavior in a direction which can also drive further cash through ancillary and through take-along traffic also.
No, that's a good point. And just to our attendees that are watching live, we encourage you to ask questions. We'll try to get to them in the second half. Most of them in the second half of the discussion. But if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in to the chat box, and we'll attempt to get to them. Jonathan, your take on on this redemption challenge. And look, let's be clear. We're picking on Virgin Australia here. It's topical right now. They're not the first airline in this crisis to put restrictions on what I'm going to call on-the-ground redemptions. A number of other programs before this week had been restricting gift cards, transfers to partner programs, redemptions for hotels, car hire, etc. Jonathan, your take on this whole concept of restricting redemptions because of the cash flow crunch?
So we actually see two different scenarios, and it depends on the funding of the liability within our client base and across the network. So and we see this more on the hospitality side, where the liability of those points is unfunded, and they've relied on revenue coming in every year to offset redemption. And so that results in the cash crunch that they're seeing. For our clients who have actually a funded liability, we're seeing the exact opposite. We're seeing them looking at ways of increasing redemption, but at a lower rate. And we're seeing more and more of our clients pushing rapidly to get to using points as a form of cash and a form of payment, such as you're seeing with Amazon Shop with Points technology. And so there's a huge movement on the funding side, on the enabling the points as a form of payment. For the unfunded liabilities, we are seeing, I'll actually give a shout out to Air Canada, who's come out with a series of promotions in the last little while to drive and enhance customer loyalty. And I think they're actually doing a really good job and innovative ideas as well. So the first thing they did was a donation to charity and giving you miles back and towards status. I think it was a 5-to-1 ratio.
Yep.
They're also doing earn promotions. So transferring miles in, so whether you're earning on your credit card or transferring from another loyalty program, and using that towards status for members. And so they're using their asset of status for 21, the second half of 20 and 21, as a way to leverage, a way to drive revenue into the organization to offset the mitigation of the cash burn of gift cards and merchandise coming out. And so I think that it's an interesting way of managing my cash burn. And I'll give them credit for moving on that rapidly. But yeah, so for what we see in the market is where there is an unfunded liability, it is now a cash preservation.
Yeah. So, one of the things here, I mean, if we go back to basics, I mean, there's a relationship between redemptions, member engagement, but, as we've been talking about in the last few minutes, redemptions cost the program money. I mean, it is money out. Now, whether you are redeeming your points and miles for an airline seat, the program needs to pay the airline for that seat, even at a super discount reduced rate. If you're redeeming your points and miles for a gift card, the program needs to literally write a check to, that gift card merchant. And if you're transferring your points and miles out of your program to another program, Program A is paying Program B. So we've talked about the cash flow impact of redemptions, but there's two other sides of it as well. Obviously, and I want to spend most of the time in a few minutes talking about the relationship between redemptions and how that affects member engagement, particularly down the road. But just while we're talking about the finances for a minute, to Len again, let's just talk through how redemptions, especially in today's world under new accounting standards, in the US, internationally, accounting standards have been in place for a number of years before, but now we have the whole world aligned on new accounting standards. And whilst this is a little bit of inside baseball and the average member doesn't care about it, But, I know the four of us always chuckle whenever we have conversations with people, or, we see comments out there that, programs are just trying to get rid of their liability, and they don't like their liability, and redemptions are bad for the P&L. That's just not true, though, is it, Len?
No, absolutely not. Redemptions are really, really good. So we do a lot of work for the audience. What we do is we're actuaries, and we do all the work around supporting loyalty program liability. So we work directly with CFOs and whatnot of various loyalty programs, help them manage liabilities, estimate breakage, cost per point, understand the economics and what you're getting in terms of the trade-off for these redemptions. And every single program that we've done, these sorts of analyses for, you see a similar thing where members that have really high ultimate redemption rates, or in other words, breakage very, very close to zero, they are so valuable to you over the long horizon, over their lifetime as a customer, right? They're just going to keep coming back, right? And yes, they're going to cost you more in redemptions because they're going to redeem all their points, but what you're getting on the top line is worth way more than that, right? So yeah, from our perspective, we're really trying to, we think redemption's very, very good, trying to encourage that. But it's important to point out it's different now in this world, right? Because we have the cash flow constraint. And so it's kind of a bit of a challenge to try to figure out how to balance those two things, the short-term pressure, cash flow pressure, versus what we know is good in the long term.
Yeah, so I mean, breaking it down to the most basic example, when an airline, or let's just use an airline, could be a hotel, but when a loyalty program, an airline loyalty program, Frequify program, sells the miles to a bank credit card, they're getting money for that, and I'm just going to totally make up the amounts here. They're getting $1 a mile. Okay, let's just use round figures. We all know that's not the figure, but every, my bank, I swipe my credit card at the store, my bank gives me a mile, the bank is purchasing that mile from the airline at, say, $1 a mile, right? Yeah. But when I redeem, whether I redeem for a seat on the airline, for a gift card, a bottle of wine, it just doesn't matter. The airline isn't paying out at a rate of $1 a mile. They're paying out at maybe 20 or 30 or maybe 50, maybe even 75 cents a mile.
Yeah.
The point is that they have the margin built into every single point and every single mile. Now, to be fair, there is the occasional redemption in an airline or hotel program that might actually cost the program $1.25. And if every redemption happened at that level, they would lose money. But they don't, because we have breakage, which is a percentage of the points earned by members actually go unredeemed and end up costing nothing. So you made a comment earlier that a lot of your work with programs is helping them calculate an accurate assessment of their cost per point. And to my very simplistic example, program is making $1 for every mile they sell to the bank, but on average, their redemptions are maybe costing them 50, 60 cents. So the point is even though there's a cash flow crunch right now, the reality is every redemption that's made is profitable for them. Is that a true statement?
I think the economics is still there. It's really a question of the horizon over which you're looking at, right? So like the economics still makes sense. Once we get out of this and the cash flow constraint dissipates, I think we really should be pushing. I think the loyalty program actually is going to be a really big engine that's going to help drive the recovery because of this, the economics that you just laid out there. There's also an additional benefit in that, like, right now we're dealing with the redemptions causing cash flow problems, but the accruals are quite the opposite, right? The accruals bring money in, and the redemption against those points doesn't happen for potential years in the future, right? So once we can get that side of the engine really churning again, it's gravy again, and we should be really pedal to the metal.
Yeah. And so I think it's an interesting point. In the last couple of weeks on the Loyalty Leader Insights Webcast, we've actually talked about what programs can be doing right now. We're not flying. Our hotels are closed. And we shouldn't be encouraging our members to travel because that's not the socially responsible thing to be doing pretty much wherever you are in the world right now. The message needs to be stay home, which we can clearly see all four of us are. So one of the questions that's come up that we tried to address in the last couple of weeks is, well, what can programs be doing now? And we're seeing a whole spectrum of responses from programs around the world. And many programs that have a good integrated on the ground earning network. And hey, Virgin Australia is a perfect example of this. Now you can use the coalition word if you like. I'm not a huge fan of it. I prefer to say everyday earn. They've been encouraging this. Now, James, you talked about the trust factor earlier. When Virgin Australia, for example, does something like this, or any of the other programs that have turned off, gift card redemptions and things like that, and they're also then trying to go out there and saying, hey, while you can't fly, engage with our on-the-ground partners. And as Len just said, every engagement with the on-the-ground partners is actually generating revenue for the airline.
Yeah.
Are those two things compatible? Or, when you're making moves that maybe bring trust into question, are members actually going to respond to you when you say, hey, shop at our partner petrol station, shop at our partner supermarket, get an insurance policy with our partner insurance company? What do you think?
It's a very good point. I mean, yes, the concepts of earn and burn in this case are not mutually exclusive, and what Len explained was really the virtuous circle of loyalty. Indeed, I mean, there's another angle to say that you can actually instill confidence by offering enriched propositions on the ground through everyday partnerships, with the promise that rewards will be plentiful when the time is right to travel through either obviously hotels or through flying, or through non-air partnerships, or through other products that you might have within your airline suite or your hotel program suite, linked to events or other aspects as well, and maybe not so linked to your core business. But yeah, I think confidence is a critical aspect to ensure that people continue to engage and spend in everyday partners on the ground. And we are talking about a time right now where, although people may not be going out to bricks and mortar retail, people are spending more than ever online. People have a lot of downtime. So there's great opportunities to actually leverage that, supporting partners as well, financial partners, retail partners also, through that process.
Pivoting slightly, Jonathan, in terms of the longer term engagement, James has talked about the virtuous cycle, of loyalty, and it's something I know all of us in our day-to-day, work. We come back to all the time in conversations on a daily basis. Explain to people how it works. The fact that redemptions actually encourage further earn behavior from members, further deeper engagement. The sooner a new member can get to their first redemption, the higher the lifetime value of that customer, over time. I mean, this is something that we all know is second nature, but Jonathan, can we explore that a little bit more here? In the context of kind of some of the challenges that we have today, and I don't want to just solely focus on Virgin Australia, but even just if you think about a typical airline program right now, if I've got a ton of miles in my account, I've been accruing them over the last number of years, and maybe I have 150,000 miles in my account, whatever it is. I've been thinking about going on a trip. I know I can't fly right now. Maybe I'm going to look to fly after the crisis is over because I got a bit of cabin fever. I'm sure there's a lot of people in that situation. But how does the challenges that members are under right now, how do you see that affecting or impacting, that kind of future redemption pattern? I mean, do you think we're going to lose that redemption cycle?
I think it's going to shift. And unfortunately, we have no idea what the shift is going to look like. When we're talking to our clients, they're the two concerns. Are people going to start traveling again? Mm-hmm. And if so, how? One of the big concerns everyone is expressing is corporate travel going to grind to a halt? People will still go on vacations. It may take a while before people are comfortable. But meetings like this may negate some of the corporate travel, which is the most lucrative travel. And so how do you engage corporations? How do you engage members? And so we are seeing a significant focus across all types of programs around micro earn and micro burn. And so whether it is card-linked offers for local retail, one of the shifts we're already starting to see is a focus on helping out local merchants that have been killed by this pandemic. And so everybody's okay with Amazon will be fine, Walmart will be fine, but your local grocery store and your local store down the road. And so how do we enable transactions there? Use our base and our currency as a way to get people to engage with local merchants in a cost-effective way through card-linked offers and real-time redemption. And so what we're seeing is, from a forward-looking point of view, is the need to engage members today in a way that's meaningful and relevant, so that when they do come back to travel, we are still front of mind and front of loyalty, and they are still emotionally engaged with our program. And so a lot more focus on that, and how do I redeem microtransactions? And you come back to your earlier comment, at a lower rate. People are less price sensitive at a $10 or $15 transaction than they are at a $1,000 transaction. And we've actually, with clients, have reduced point values by about 35% versus core redemption, and seen an uptake of redemption. And netting out customers about a 6-7% net gain on their P&L on an annual basis. And so it's a significant value proposition, and you overlay that with an earn, which drives revenue in, allows you to keep your members engaged and active, so that when they do come back, you're still, as I said, emotionally engaged and relevant.
So, Jonathan, one of the things I hear from program managers all the time, is a concern that sometimes, when they're exploring either expanding their on-the-ground partner network, particularly on the redemption side, or looking to broaden their micro burn and micro earn, but particularly their micro burn side of the equation. Obviously, we've talked about the cash outflow challenges right now, but one of the questions I know I get all the time is, well, are members just going to use these on-the-ground redemptions, gift card redemptions, micro burn redemptions, to kind of cash out and leave the program? Do we see a difference between the future engagement without, basically, hey, do people keep flying our airline, when they making 150,000 business class cabin redemptions, the behavior of those members versus, well, do people keep flying our airline if they're just making micro burn transactions? I know you hear that as well from program managers. I just wonder if you could put some insight,
Sure.
Because that's a good question.
And so this is where technology has enabled us to be more efficient and more effective. And before, when you launched a program, it was everybody got the same offer. Today, we have the ability to actually target by segment. A segment can be down to a single user. And so we start looking at the member base, and a member who travels once every 3 years on a vacation, we may treat differently to a super elite status person who's on a plane every week. And so when you start looking at your different segments, to turn around to somebody who's flying 100 segments a year and giving them the ability to pay for a coffee on the way in to work with their point is just going to drive further engagement and further revolving. And they'll be more likely to take you up on offers, which says, go over here and get triple points. Mm-hmm. And so you don't look at your base as a homogeneous base anymore. And so when you're talking to the loyalty providers, it's very much, what are you trying to achieve with each segment of your base? And if you've got somebody who travels every 3 or 4 years, and I don't want to expire those points anymore because they're getting bad press. But if somebody's got $20 worth of points and I can get them out for $5 worth of cost, that's a win. And so it's very, very much a targeted offer approach. And the advantage of technology today is you can do that cost effectively. You can actually analyze a database and put out different offers to everybody on this call in real time, location geo-target based for both earn and burn. And so the old problems aren't there anymore. Now it's about innovative thinking, and it's just getting your CFO to be okay with writing big checks, knowing full well that you're going to get it back over time.
And Len, I want to come back to you in a few minutes on that question about, CFOs fearing the cash out, and, sometimes, there's the old joke in technology, IT people, love to basically, say, a user with a little bit of knowledge is incredibly dangerous. And, perhaps, we could make a joke that a CFO with a little bit of knowledge is a little bit dangerous, but I actually think it's the other way around. I actually think that one of the biggest dangers to large loyalty programs is CFOs who don't understand the mechanic of loyalty, who don't understand that an investment in redemption, an investment in engaging your members, particularly your members with a behavioral propensity to come back to your brand as a result and to be motivated by the program, isn't something you should be afraid of. And that investment actually will come back and pay off in spades. We know a lot of large programs, there's been a bit of a zeitgeist in the last few years that, well, we should only be rewarding our top members. But the problem is not all, but a large segment of those top members are managed corporate travelers, who actually don't have any say in the airline they're flying or the hotel they're choosing. And we saw at the beginning of this crisis that managed corporate travelers were the first segment to stop traveling. Self-managed travelers actually kept flying for a while. So there's a big danger there. And I think that to the Virgin Australia example, you can imagine that the administrators have come in, and a shout out to Deloitte there, and the very first thing they've said is, we're going to stop writing checks. Everybody's got to stop writing checks. Even if you're in a division that's not under administration, everybody's got to stop writing checks.
Yeah.
Problem there, to everything we've talked about so far, is, and again, it's not just Virgin Australia, but they're the most acute example of it right now. The problem there, though, is if members suddenly now no longer trust you, if members now actually genuinely fear for the future of the currency, and hey, Ansett Australia members, 19 years ago, they thought they were going to be okay and they lost everything. So there is a reason that people are going to be fearful in Australia right now for their points balance. But if you break that bond of trust with customers, it makes it challenging to go out there and say, well, hey, we've got a buy miles promotion coming out next week. You should buy some more points, or you should shop with our partner grocery store, or we've got a great micro-burn redemption offer for you to engage with us on the ground. But it also makes it difficult. I know we talked about this, but it also makes it difficult if they want to go out, in the future, to actually do deals with new partners on the ground. They want to sign up a cinema complex. They want to sign up more merchants on the ground where people can earn in their everyday lives. And of course, everyday earn means revenue into the program. All of these things are now much, much more difficult, because not just members, but potential future partners are going to be reticent about doing business with the program because of what they've just done. Now, if you're the administrator and you're thinking about that bigger picture rather than just thinking, oh, stop writing checks, it's a very different view, isn't it, Len? So go back to the joke we just made about, do CFOs have too much knowledge, or do they not have enough?
Right. Yeah, I'm of the camp that generally speaking, they don't have enough, right? What they tend to have in front of them all the time is basically numbers about breakage and about cost per point and the liability. And they look on their balance sheet and they say, wow, I've got $1 billion liability here. Like, all I see is the cost. And they have to, because they have to book that on the balance sheet. So it has to be readily available, and they have to kind of get comfortable with what that number is. But you know what they can't put on the balance sheet is that expected future profit from your customers that you're getting and that you're improving because that liability is there, right? And so one of the things that we advocate for is kind of building on your concept there, David. They need more information. They can't just look at breakage and redemption costs, right? Because everybody on this webinar knows no good business decisions have ever been made by just looking at cost. You got to weigh that cost-benefit trade-off, right? And so you should really never show the liability without having a really, really good estimate for that expected future profit that you're getting in return. Better still, being able to show how that's growing over time and how the program tactics and strategies are helping nudge that growth over time. And even better still, jumping back to what Jonathan was saying, looking at that at a segment level. Even better if you can get it down to the individual member level, which is one of the things we advocate for. That really helps you then better understand where you should be spending your dollars, and kind of that's, in my view, the key to kind of convincing the CFO that, hey, yeah, you know what, we should be sending these targeted offers to this segment of people over here, and let's ignore this group over here because they're really not worth it. Once you understand that long-term value, that long-term expected profit net of that redemption cost, then you can convey to the CFO, this is good ROI. We're going to make a ton of money off this if you have the patience to wait 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, this is also about the fact of who is your program relevant to. And actually, I just looking over the chat, I see Peter's made a good point. Programs that have a good on-the-ground partner network are relevant to their entire base. To Jonathan's point earlier about some segments are interested in micro earn and micro burn, and that's not going to be relevant necessarily to your super top tier customers all the time with high balances who are really actually just, living in a hotel and on a plane, right? But the broader your value proposition across your redemption catalog is and across your earn opportunities is, the more relevant your program is to your member base. if the only way they can earn points is by flying, then anybody who doesn't consider themselves a frequent flyer, which is basically 90% of your customers, 89% of your customers, why would they even sign up with your program in the first place? It's just not relevant. And we talked earlier about, well, if you're only going to be relevant to your top 5, 10%, well, maybe you're relevant to them, but are you actually going to influence their behavior and move the needle? Some other comments that have come through the chat, and it's really insightful, is, a reminder, we did talk about this in the last couple of weeks, but right now there's very limited marketing going out from programs. So there isn't the ability to go out and solicit them to engage with on-the-ground partners. And those programs that are doing so, it's a very, very fine line between spamming members right now with irrelevant communications and actually getting some on-the-ground engagement and behavior so that they don't forget about you, number one, but more importantly for the CFO, you're still generating some cash flow coming in. Some other comments have come through the chat, and I think, it's good to recap some of these challenges. I mean, we have the situation right now, the four of us, we prefer to have these chats in person, and for those interested in these chats in person, please visit loyaltysummit.com. We have our conferences in New York and London. Please stay tuned on the website there, and we will have the latest updates for when they'll be back up and live for people to attend. But we're not the only ones working from home in our bedrooms and living rooms right now. And, I know after SARS and 9/11 and the Great Recession, there's always been travel's dead, corporate travel managers are going to cut the budget. But we haven't had the technology before that we have now. We haven't had the success, of Zoom, etc. I mean, multiple platforms out there now that can actually do the job and can do the job reliably. Universities are running classes virtually. Schools are running classes virtually. I mean, for those people that still have jobs, it's business as usual. It's just your office is now your bedroom now, or your study, or what have you. There's a very real risk when this crisis starts waning. And I'm completely ignoring people being afraid to fly, people being concerned for their health still, and I'm completely ignoring continuing governmental restrictions on travel in some places. Just from a business travel perspective, there is a very real risk that either workplaces that have resisted work from home are now going to be forced to have more flexible policies. If for no other reason than it's been proven that can work, they've already had to invest in the technology, and some of their workers might have got used to working from home and kind of like a little bit of that flexibility. Now, some are probably getting cabin fever and can't wait to get back to the office. That's a different story. But also, if you're a corporate travel manager and you've got budget constraints, because let's face it, who doesn't have budget constraints right now? It's not just loyalty programs. The temptation from the CFO to cut the budget line and allocation for travel, I mean, it's got to be massive, right? So when we come out of this, who do we need to get back on board? Is it new members? Do we need to reposition the program, go out, try to acquire new members? Is it try to re-engage our past existing members? Is it tapping our elite base who were our top flyers and top stayers and top engaged members immediately before the crisis? And is it as simple as just turning on the communications, going back to them with hey, we're back in business, come fly with us, everybody gets double miles for the first 3 months? I mean, is it as simple as that, James?
Not quite as simple, but there's an element of, I think, each of the elements you touched on. I think we've seen a lot of programs obviously take a compassionate position, and we've seen very generous positions around tier status retention and miles stability, recognising the fact that people don't have an option to fly right now even if they wanted to. So I think obviously you need to recognise the loyalty from the past and obviously ensure that people aren't losing out when they have no choice other than to not fly. But I think also qualified acquisition is very important also, as it always is, but more important than ever when we come out of this. And there's an opportunity for programs to look at that in terms of their customer life cycle and techniques on ensuring that they're getting the right types of people into the program that can deliver the optimal revenue. For example, first and business class flyers, for example, how do you maximize acquisition through those channels, especially at a time when, who knows, corporate travel may certainly, have a different outlook in the future. These are things we don't really know for sure, and we'll have to sort of ride along that journey. I've looked at a couple of other aspects as well. pretty simple loyalty fundamentals, but things like the gold gradient effect around tier status, around rewards, so giving people a leg up to reach that reward. Len and Jonathan have both talked about the downstream engagement that comes from rewards. So a little bit of investment up front gets people engaging again in the program, completing that loyalty cycle. And then we all know through the analytics side of things, there's a high propensity that we see the downstream engagement. So I think there's an important aspect in terms of the life cycle comms, triggered communications, etc., that can be teed up and ready to go as soon as we see some scale in terms of network operations returning.
And Jonathan, to follow up on James's comments there, one of the things that occurs, James mentioned about, giving members a leg up now, try to keep the finger in the pie, to paraphrase, for when it's time to do business again. But when we come out of this, we're in a bit of a unique situation, aren't we? In the sense that pretty much every airline program around the world, every hotel program around the world, and you know what? Every retail program around the world, it's a massive reset button, isn't it? I mean, we've had this arms race that started with, the old joke of somebody at the checkout at the supermarket, pulling out their wallet and 200 loyalty cards fly out. Now that's digitized and all the rest of it. But realistically now, we've never had a situation before where it's a massive reset button. Everybody has been reprioritizing their personal priorities and their household priorities, not just from a financial point of view, but you know what? I can't fly with that airline right now. One of the key tenets of frequent flyer programs and any sort of frequency-based loyalty program is frequency. It's habit. It's getting your Starbucks, every morning. It's going to the airport and getting on the same airline all the time because you know what? You're just used to booking for that airline. You go to the same terminal. You know where the check-in is. You know what time the regular flight is between your, regular destinations. It's just habit more than anything, and loyalty programs tap into that and leverage off it. But we've pushed a massive reset button. We've broken the habit. You're not going to Starbucks to get your coffee every morning. You're not flying your regular airline. You're not staying in the same hotel. And given everybody is in the same boat here, are we going to see, I'll rephrase the question. Is the right answer an arms race when we come out of this? So
I think people are creatures of habit. And so the fact that I actually fly Emirates airline every week and now it's ground to a halt, when it comes back, I will go back to my comfort zone. And I think the onus is to get me there first, to make sure my first flight is back to my comfort zone. Because like you said, I know how to check in, I know how they're going to treat me, and we are creatures of habit. I think the biggest challenge is just getting people to that first transaction, right? And so, we're looking at we're trying to see what indicators there are in the marketplace about how the world's going to change. And the one thing we've seen is corporate REITs, so real estate investment trusts, are through the toilet from a valuation. Because as you had mentioned before, people are used to working at home and there's a glut of office space. People are getting more comfortable. If you had said to me 2 years ago, 6 months ago, you're going to do a sales pitch to a prospective client on a video conference, I would have said, no, I'm just going to get on a plane and I'm going to be there. Right? In the last couple of months, that's what we've been doing. And so that reset is going to be the hardest on how do we get people traveling again and traveling comfortably. And I think that's going to be the ultimate challenge. Once we get somebody engaged again and they say, you know what, my first flight back on Emirates, I'm going to feel like I'm coming home. And so I'm less concerned about that than more about just getting the traction around getting people to actually engage again and get moving again. And so I think that's going to be our challenge in this industry.
Excuse me, sorry. So, Len, I think to Jonathan's point, people are creatures of habit. So inertia, all things being equal, inertia is going to mean to some degree people are going to pick up where they left off, notwithstanding reductions in travel budgets and working from home and things like that. But generally speaking, if you've been loyal to airline A or hotel A, you're probably going to go back. That's going to be your default position, all things being equal. Is it fair to say then that all things being equal, you're going to retain the customers that are able to travel again once this crisis is over, unless you mess it up. So if you're saying, dear loyalty program, it's yours to screw this up. And maybe the way you screw it up is by restricting redemptions, not looking after customers, being the last one out of the gate to reassure them that their benefits that they've earned are safe for next year, and that the airline is thinking about them or the program is thinking about them. Is it about, hey, you need to change your travel plans? Hey, bad luck for you. We're keeping your money. We've cancelled your flight. Bad luck for you. We're keeping your money. Is it up to programs and brands to lose the customer at this point? And as long as they do the right things, they're going to be in good shape?
Yeah, I agree that people are creatures of habit. I'm absolutely going to go back to the airlines that I'm flying with because I'm comfortable with it. I'm earning the points. I'm getting the benefits. Like, it just makes a lot of sense to me. So I do think that that's going to happen. I do think that that's not only our challenge is to make that happen, but it's also our opportunity as all of us being loyalty practitioners. Loyalty programs are going to be, I think, one of the best tools we have to keep people engaged and get them to come back so that they do come back to the brand, and that's their first flight is with their home brand, right? So I do think it's an opportunity to be lost if we don't do it right? That's, again, not to discount the hard decisions we're going to have to make because we don't have unlimited resources, but we're going to have to make these decisions, and we should make sure that we're thinking about the customer, how it's going to impact them, how it's going to impact our relationship with them, and to whatever extent we can accommodate that and still survive as a business. I think there's a really good ROI and reason to do that.
So, just to take the obligatory sponsor break, I want to acknowledge some of our sponsors. Engage, Jonathan, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you coming on board on that. Amia, Adara, Hilton, who's our hotel sponsor for the Americas, Radisson Rewards, who's our hotel sponsor for our London events. Thank you to all our sponsors. Also, plug for next week's webcast. We're going to be talking about balancing member value versus program profit. So it's a good natural follow-up to our conversation this week. But I want to pivot. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to pivot to breakage or the expiry of points. Obviously, people are restricted in their ability to engage with programs right now. They earn opportunities. Certainly, the core earn and redemption for airlines and hotels just isn't there. And for those programs that have activity-based breakage, part of the ability to reset your points expiry is to be able to redeem. Again, Virgin Australia is a quick example. They've said, we're going to pause the points expiry while you can't make redemptions. And that's all well and good. And we've seen programs around the world either extending their points expiry all the way out through next year, or maybe they're kicking the can down the road a couple of months, which probably makes them look a little tight-wadded right now. They probably need to fix that and revisit that. But financial models, and Len, your day-to-day job, with the work you do from an actuarial perspective, is, it's very, very fine line business, right? In terms of getting the correct estimate of what your breakage rates are based on both the historical and projected rates of redemption, member engagement at the micro segment level. It's all very, very complicated, math. When all of a sudden we're kicking out these expiration dates down the road, and I also want to acknowledge the number of programs have removed expiration of points. What does that do to our models? If you're in the room with the CFO saying, look, all right, you're telling me not to cut off redemptions, but you're also telling me we need to extend points expiry. What does that do to my P&L?
So it's very difficult to really answer that with any degree of certainty, right? Because of the world we live in. Historical data has kind of gone out the window and less relevant today. And I can tell you from firsthand that, even the most sophisticated model for breakage is going to produce results that aren't going to be truthful of what's likely to emerge in the future, right? So what's really key is you got to layer on a level of professional judgment on top of the model output. The model outputs is still useful, but you gotta insert your professional judgments to account for the weaknesses in the model because they just don't understand that we're in a pandemic right now. And so that's absolutely going to be a key part of the process. Now, in a normal world, you can't actually reasonably model out changes in expiration rules, and we've been doing a lot of that sort of thing with, as you pointed out, with as you point out, the different programs eliminating expiration rules altogether, everybody else wants to know what the impact's going to be, right? And so there's that component. In this world, because we don't really know the historical data and how things are going to emerge in the future are just so disconnected. What we're really advising our customers is, hey, you really should pause on that expiration for the time being, right? Because what does that do? It leaves those points in members' pockets, so that again, when we get to the recovery point, that's going to help you drive the engagement and the return, right? And is it going to cost you much? Probably not, because the people that were going to expire anyways, not very engaged, when expirations resume, probably still going to expire, right? So it's not going to cost you a whole lot, but you do get at least some benefit on the other side of it, right? In terms of helping get people coming back and whatnot. So that's kind of what we've been advising. The critical component here, though, is you got to have the infrastructure to monitor results very, very closely, because we're setting assumptions right now. And whether or not those assumptions prove to be true, you don't know until the actual data emerges, right? You got to look at it month by month by month. As Jonathan pointed out, the segments are really, really important in understanding how it's changing by segment. Are your high redeemers coming back? Are they coming back at a high rate? Are the low redeemers coming back? Who is it? And being able to set those assumptions at those different segments really helps you plow through as much of the uncertainty as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. James?
Yeah, in fact, I'm somewhat accountable to finance for those measurements myself, because we had those discussions internally going back a few weeks. And yeah, I mean, look, we believe in general in applying that sort of, business logic layer over the model, that things will ultimately flatten out in any case down the road. And if I look at specific from an Emirates standpoint, around 40% of our rewards overall are cash plus miles rewards, which are effectively purchasing commercial tickets using miles just like cash. So there's a great advantage in actually retaining these miles for people, particularly those who have small balances, who they might fly once or twice in 18 months or 2 years. They won't have enough for an upgrade reward or a classic reward, a more costly reward, but they will use that as a credit and will market that to them as a credit and a means for them to come onto Emirates.com and book when they might otherwise be price driven. So yeah, we're actually projecting incremental benefit, in fact, by actually delaying the miles expiry. And it's going to be very interesting to monitor that, and I'm expecting to be able to tell a positive story at the end of it.
Great. No, and I think that makes sense. And again, it's in terms of the kind of the theme that's come through this entire discussion, about looking after the members so that they're there when we come out of the other side of this and we're able to quickly re-engage with them. Jonathan, from your perspective, with the work you guys have been doing, the modeling and the discussions you have with programs, in terms of the changes in breakage policies or the pausing of expiration, thoughts and insights from you there.
So philosophically, I find if we're expiring points, we failed as a program. There's a huge cost of getting a member to engage with us the first time. And so when we talk to customers about expiring of points, it's just an acknowledgement of a failure. Every customer has a different cost of acquisition. We've acquired a member, they may have $5 or $10 worth of value of points that expire, and from a CFO or from an accounting point of view, it's great. But if you can now engage that member, James was talking about, you now and get $10 or $20 off their next flight. That's now at least got value out of my acquisition, and hopefully they've generated and become revolvers. And so we need to focus. Oh, and by the way, whenever you expire points, there is a negative experience. So any customer who's ever got up and looked into their account and seen their points have disappeared is now an anti-customer. And so there's a cost of now getting them back. And so philosophically, we try to work with our clients to look at breakage as a bad thing and look at expiring points as a bad thing. And then how do you get those points off your balance sheet in the most cost-effective way possible? And so using them to discount a flight or to pay for a preferred seat, something that's a revenue or luggage or a revenue-generating tool that doesn't have a high cost associated to it. And so philosophically, we're working with our clients more and more on targeting and segmenting offers to round people and monetizing those points that should expire into driving future revenue, because you never know when that customer's landscape's going to change. They could switch jobs and now suddenly they're a traveler, But if they hated Emirates for expiring my points, well, I'm going to go fly Etihad. And so
your silver member today is your top platinum level member tomorrow.
Right. And you've gone through the cost of acquiring. So you've done all the marketing, you've got them on the airline, they've had a good experience, they signed up for the loyalty program, now you want to disincent them. And so unfortunately it is a highly profitable piece of a program. So you need to have an economics behind it that says, I can now take those points that would have expired, redeem them in a way that will drive future revenue or even existing revenue into the program to keep the customer engaged.
You know, we had a great question here in the chat from Dave Thompson. I mean, he brings up the issue of, I know we sort of touched on it in previous weeks, but, he brings up the issue of what about redemptions on the core product? I mean, the reality is, notwithstanding the capacity restrictions, most airlines are going to emerge from this crisis, a smaller shadow of them, of themselves. Some will still resemble what they were before, but perhaps more streamlined, and others will be lucky to still have their tail fin out there at the airport. The success of hotel and airline programs traditionally has been because the travel product is sexy. People don't sign up to a frequent flyer program because they want to redeem a $10 gift card at Starbucks. They sign up to a frequent flyer program because they have aspirations to taking that first class trip around the world or sitting on the beach, sipping Mai Tais somewhere. Now we know from the data, most people don't redeem for those in the end, but that is the motivating factor that actually gets them to enroll in the program. They're thinking they want to get a free flight sometime in the future. Hey, it'd be cool maybe if it's a fancy flight. It probably won't be, but we'll take a free flight. And with load factors so high the last few years, airlines have been trying to squeeze profit out of the programs. We don't have so much availability in Saver or classic award level rewards. Even hotel night redemptions, more variable. There's push for dynamic pricing, yada, yada, yada. And there's nothing wrong with dynamic pricing if it still represents value to the member, but in most implementations, it hasn't been. It's just been astronomical pricing because somebody has those points and don't care about the utility of those points and will pay for it. And as airlines, we have fights with revenue management to release those award seats if we're wanting the Saver Classic Award. James, I don't want to put you on the spot with talking about Emirates specifically. So feel free to just answer kind of, general thoughts, or I'll even let you off the hook on this one if you need to. But to the panel, as we finish up, what I want to get your thoughts on is the reality is when we come out of this crisis, even with reduced capacity, there's going to be plenty of seats on planes. There's going to be plenty of hotel rooms available that aren't booked, at least initially. So if we're looking out in the calendar, the 11th, 12 month out in the redemption calendar right now, where people could make redemption bookings, should airlines and hotels be pivoting right now if they want to stop writing checks out the door to gift card merchants, and grocery stores and Starbucks? Should they simply be opening up their core inventory right now to keep redemptions in-house?
If I could start, David, that's a great question. And I think it underscores the importance of financial transparency and reporting transparency internally. I think it's really important that loyalty program managers are able to speak to their revenue optimization colleagues in their own language. So you can actually, a reward seat's not a free seat, even though it might be reported that way because of legacy systems and the way it was done 20 years ago. A reward seat does have yield, and then a reward seat also has ancillary revenues, it has seatings, it has bags, it has take-along traffic as well. That also is an influencer. It's booked through a direct sales channel at lower costs, no GDS costs, no agents' commissions. So there's a great story to be told, and especially when the partners, if you have the spread right in your program, we talked earlier about the profitability of loyalty programs driven by the earning through partners. You can position the earn through partners effectively as a new age or an alternative sales channel away from the non-traditional sales channel. And I think the sooner that revenue optimization colleagues understand that, and they realize that the retail partners, the malls, and the banks are effectively buying seats at reasonable yield in advance, the better. They'll actually celebrate the loyalty program, and they'll actually come to you to actually say, how can you help us out? Our seat factors are down. What can you do to help us?
Yeah, ultimately that really comes down to it. what loyalty programs are there for, and that's, if you're in airlines, to put bums in seats. And if you have the relationship with revenue management, then the loyalty program can deliver revenue management's goal, which is bums in seats. Ultimately, if that seat is the whole premise of saver level award seats and classic award seats is that if that seat is going out empty, you have zero revenue from it, right? If you are able to have it redeemed as a redemption, there is some revenue or some yield attached to that. Len.
Yeah, no, I completely echo what James had said. I think the key for us over the next several months is going to be let's get members engaged. Let's get them earning points as much as they can. Find ways to do it. I love what Jonathan said around the micro burn, micro earn. Just find ways to make that happen so that they're still engaged, and that when we get out to the other side of this thing, they have points in their pocket. That's going to be a good incentive mechanism to get them to come back and actually fly. I think that's a big component of what we need to be focusing on.
Thanks, Len. And final comments as we wrap up, Jonathan.
So just looking at Doug Smith's question, and I would say that every single one of our clients is either in negotiations or in implementation with us on getting an Amazon shop with points integration up and running. Every single one of them is engaging with us on ensuring we can develop the micro burn and micro earn strategy. And so you're going to see more and more of that. And I keep coming back to airlines and hotels need to get their, I say us, because people just sit on a plane every week, back out and running first. Because if I'm flying out of Canada and my default is Air Canada, but Emirates says, hey, why don't you try this first? That's where I'm going to stick to. And so there's a huge opportunity to gain market share and to drive member engagement. And it's just moving rapidly. And there's as you said, we're doing a reset, and with any reset gives us the right, the opportunity to come out stronger and better. And so, hopefully, hopefully the good airlines, and we'll see them doing it. I'll give another shout out to Emirates. I just saw a notice from them that they're allowing members to shop in North America and deliver to a central depot and then ship it across. I think it's great. It's innovative. It's brilliant. And so the more airlines are doing that, the more the customers will be engaged, and the Virgin Australia issue will be just a blip on the radar down the road.
Thanks, Jonathan. Look, I'd like to thank our guests this week, Len Llaguno, James Curry, Jonathan Silver. Thank you very much for giving up your time and joining us for Loyalty Leader Insights. Next week's webcast topic, we're going to be talking about balancing member value versus program profits. So do tune in. If you have missed any of our previous ones, or you have colleagues that want to see the replay of this one, please check out our YouTube channel. And the best place to follow us is Loyalty Summit on LinkedIn. That's where we'll put all the links to the replays to be able to sign up for next week. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hopefully, we'll have you back on the program again at not too distant future. And thanks very much for the insights into our redemption engagement and liability management. A very, very quick view into that this week. Thanks all. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.